Well, if you click that video, you potentially have asked yourself, what's up in the future of Planet Zoo? In this video, we're going to break it up into 3 sections, analyzing what could be in next year and how likely it actually is. So we are going to start with basically the foundation of my analysis today. Then we are going to go into what you see on screen right now, and that is some aquatic animals, or better to say marine animals. And then we will move over to our feathery friends, the birds. Now let's get things started and talk with the foundation. Alright, so before we go into the very interesting bits, we have to set the foundation of today's video. So first of all, obviously it is super speculative, and we also don't really have any news about this. In the past, so for example before the aquatic DLC was announced, there have been already some findings in the data of Planet Zoo about deep diving as a mechanic and so on and so forth. And this time around we are pretty much blank, we are pretty much empty. There is no news out there about any potential addition to the game beyond what we already know. However, if you read between the lines, there are some very good things to keep in mind. I'm going to start very much step by step. So first of all, let's start with the good things. Planet Zoo is the best-selling IP that Frontier owns at the moment. That said, even considering the other games they have, that is pretty interesting, and it also is pretty impressive if you ask me. Planet Zoo is the only game from all the park builders that is only available on PC. It's not available on console yet, I should say. And also, we are talking about the likeliness of console at the very end of the video. So if you are interested for console, please stick with me to the end. I have some very good things to talk about. Now, the second thing about this is the player base of Planet Zoo is very, very, very constant and very good. It's very balanced. It's not high, but it's still much higher than Planet Coaster or Jurassic World Evolution on computer. You always have to add the console players to it, but even with adding the console players, at least the data I could get, they are pretty much on par with Jurassic World Evolution 2, and that is only with the PC versus all consoles and PC included for Jurassic World Evolution. That is pretty impressive and shows how much interest for the game there is. Anyways, there is a third thing that we should keep in mind. They have actually opened something up that I wasn't really aware of. It is such a big change. But if you consider the addition of the large exhibit, or the walkthrough exhibit, 2 DLCs ago, actually I should say it was with the free update, but the only things flying are coming with the DLC, so it technically is in the DLC. However, birds and bats open up a completely new roster of species. Yes, they are somehow exhibit animals per definition, but they are also a completely new thing to play with. It makes the exhibits a lot more usable. It makes flying animals quite nice, and having the null option really gives us endless freedom. So that leads to the point, Planet Zoo is in a very good state. However, we also have to set the other side of the foundation, and that is a bit more of a negative. We are now at the end of year 3. We just celebrated the 3rd birthday of, or the 3rd anniversary of Planet Zoo, and if we go back to Planet Coaster back in the day, that was basically the beginning of the end. So after the 3rd anniversary, we only got 2 more DLCs, and that's that. Done. Never anything else for the game, then the console release, and that's it. However, I'm quite certain that we won't see the same thing happening for Planet Zoo. What makes me so positive about this? Well, I think it's basically because the game is selling so much better. If you compare the life cycle of Planet Coaster, after 3 years it was already pretty much down to the very, very core. There was not that much going on. The interest in the game kind of declined. There was also some other stuff on the horizon, and at the same time, Planet Zoo was already announced, so obviously focus shifted to another Planet game. The engine of the game is, though, and that's also another very positive thing, not only developed by the time, it also has been developed during the state of Planet Zoo. So we have seen constant updates in the engine, thanks to, I'm assuming, Jurassic World Evolution 2, but Planet Zoo is running on the same Cobra engine version as Jurassic World Evolution 2 is, and that means they are constantly updating the engine version. That hasn't been the case with Planet Coaster, so that is just something to keep in mind, which is rather positive. However, another negative we have to address here is the size of a team. Now, obviously, the longer a game exists, the more likely it is that the team gets smaller and smaller and smaller, simply because you would take people and put them on bigger projects that are about to launch, and after launch, you might bring them back. So, there is a good chance that the man size or the manpower behind the project isn't as big anymore, and so we have to keep that in mind for the coming chapters of this video. So let's speak about aquatic or marine animals next. Alright, so marine animals or full aquatic animals have been a wish for this game forever, I guess. And I'm still a little bit confused why we don't have them. So the aquatic DLC was the first big DLC with a game-changing option by the factor of deep diving. So as you can see over here, I'm using a mod from the wonderful Leaf with the green sea turtle, and as you can see, it's you know, swimming down in here, doing some rolls over here because they are based on, I assume it is the normal sea lion, but I'm not entirely sure which one they are based on. You can see they improved the animations over time, but it is not really super nice. It is okay to look at, but it's not like brilliant. And this is a very good segue into my little talk here. Now, we do have all the mechanics in the game. If you look at the likes of the sea lions or the gray seals or whatever diving animals we have, the otters and stuff, we have a lot of different rigs. We even have the beautiful bears and big cats diving with insanely detailed animations. It's looking wonderful. If you've ever seen the big cat doing that crazy roll, or the you know, or the polar bear swimming on its back on the top of the water surface, it looks so gorgeous, you know. And this is exactly what we need. We need at least 1 or 2 animals that are full diving. Now, the thing is, we would need a completely overhaul in the barrier system, and I think this might be the reason why we haven't seen it yet. The problem that we would have or would face is that we don't have the normal door. Just imagine you build a tank and then you don't have a door. I made a dedicated video about this quite a while ago, that they would need to add a certain new functional doorway into the habitat. So you have to have an outside connection, and then what happens with, you know, the keeper going into the habitat, because they have to check it. Or do they use drones, just as in Jurassic World Evolution 2? I think kind of drones wouldn't fit the game, so they have to have another solution, and I'm quite certain that this is the reason why they haven't done it. Truth to be told, I think chances are 50-50 that we will ever see this, because I think it's a huge thing to pull off, and it honestly, I think it really depends on if the team is big enough or not. Because even though I would have loved to see something like that at the end of the year, just before Christmas, it is very much likely you don't do that because of all the troubleshooting. With such a big update, you would need to have a lot of, you know, people at hand to fix all the issues. With the aquatic DLC, back in 2020 it was, I guess. Or was it 2019? No, it was 2020. They had a whole year to prepare that, you know. You can tell that this was planned from launch already, and they brought this all the way to the Christmas update. So everything was kind of fledged out, and it was released a little bit earlier, so that they had a bit of time to troubleshoot things. And so after 3 years, when the team isn't as big anymore and it potentially hasn't been prepared for so long, you wouldn't necessarily do that. However, I'm not going to talk too much about which type of animals I would love to see in a full aquatic update, but the thing is, we have so many animals in the game where you would say necessarily they don't belong in a zoo. I think it's fair enough to say there is a chance that we have enough potential animals that could come with an update like that, that you normally do see in a zoo. So it's a zoo game about education. It makes a lot of sense. Full stop. That's all I'm going to say about that. However, speaking about the mechanics and stuff, I always thought about the need of having that as a full aquatic and habitat update. The more I think about this, I think it could also be solved by the likes of the wonderful, insanely detailed and beautiful walk-through habitats. However, we might get another exhibit type, which is a aquatic exhibit, for example, and then you could build tanks and put animals in, and they would potentially be animated, at least for fish or something like that. I think I would love that. However, I wouldn't love that obviously with like the likes of whales or maybe even dolphins, who knows, or whatever type of big fish or whatever type of you know, sea turtle, for example. Excuse me. They would at least be in. Alright, so even though this scene in front of you guys has been set up as almost like a showcase area, it is not meant to be a show. For those of you who followed this project, this very project is the Dolphin Bay Rescue Project, and it has to be said that whatever they do with the full marine update, I really do hope that they keep it to the same philosophy that they had in the game quite yet. Let them add them in with a humongous request for space and deep dive space. Let them do anything that is, making sure that the lives of these animals are respected. So we don't have shows, but we do actually have enrichment items. We don't have small habitat potential for them, but we do have a lot of new stuff to create huge tanks and the best possible way to keep them. And also, I really would love to see even more educational stuff about them. So maybe even, and that would be like, I know that this is something really far-fetched, but I would love to see maybe a keeper even being able to dive to clean the windows. So for example, we could solve the issue of having a keeper go in by the fact that they are animated. So let's say there is like a facility that you have to click to the habitat, so it's almost like a second kind of gate that is a bit bigger, as if you go in and then the keeper can change his cloth and then they are going in as a diver. First thing could be to clean the habitat, that would be the equivalent to the poover, and obviously to give them food, that would be like put food into the underwater feeder that we already have. So, and also obviously to box them, they would kind of swim towards them and then just kind of box the animals. So this way it would be very simple to not really have a new gate per se, but we just need to have the same gate as a different type where they would change claws, and that's about it. I really do hope they consider that, because I felt insanely inspired by making this Dolphin Bay rescue project. I have talked quite a lot about this, so I don't want to go too deep into it. If you guys are interested, I would highly recommend to check out the Dolphin Bay rescue project. If you Google, if you search for that on my channel, you'll find the episode 1 and you will see everything about this. Not really much change because we used mods and the mods are still the same, so there's a good chance for you guys. You would enjoy that. So I see you there, but now let's talk about the birds. Alright, so the topic of birds is a little bit more simple, because I think things have changed. This is obvious. By the way, this beautiful habitat in front of you is by Epedemic, and we are going to have another one in a couple of seconds. If you're interested in a butterfly house, stick with me. But we talk about birds, okay? Now, why do we look at butterflies? I think because, or actually bats in this case, I think because we have to face it that actual birds will not make it into the game. And I mean by actual birds, I'm talking about like eagles or hawks, or even condors, like big birds that would require a humongous habitat or even like a free reserve or whatever, sanctuary, just as the big things we have in Jurassic World Evolution with the huge aviaries. I can only imagine, and this is 100% my personal opinion, 100% speculation, but I can only think of the whole system being too complicated, because otherwise there is not really a point why birds would not be in a park manager game or like a zoo building game like Planet Zoo is, because we do require these things to have the full picture of like animals living in a zoo. Nearly every zoo does feature some types of birds, simply because obviously birds make up a large part of our wildlife anyways, and so this is why they came up. I'm pretty certain that this is the reason they came up with this beautiful realization of flying animals, and that is the bats. Now, bats kind of resemble the way Frontier is about to go with the birds and the full flying mechanics in the game. I'm quite certain that this is the way to go, because obviously that makes a lot of sense, and we will have to face it. But how exactly this is going to shape up, at least in my opinion, we are going to find out in my next kind of sub-chapter of birds. Alright, we are now in the beautiful, wonderful classic butterfly house by Plastic Swans, and you can see eventually some butterflies flying around in front of you or next to the side. I want to take this example to outline what I think Frontier is going to do. I think the improvement in quality between the bats and the butterflies is already pretty insane. I have talked about that in my DLC review. I have talked about that in my butterfly build in Sicily Zoo. They have done an insanely good job in animating these butterflies in so much more believable way than the bats, that I'm really positively surprised by it. I have been a little bit on the split side when it came to the walkthrough exhibits, because the second they were there, I knew that this is the way to go with like at least a good amount or good chunk of birds and flying animals in general. I was on a split side because I could not really imagine if it's good enough in terms of how good Planet Zoo as a game to be individual and to be creative is. However, with the implementation of a null variant of these exhibits and with obviously the improvement they did with the butterflies, I am so much more positive, because one thing that I find very interesting was the guest interaction, that guests can actually have the butterflies land on their hand and then even have like 2 or 3 variants of this animation. We have a lot more path and a lot more loops that these animals fly, and specifically with this over here, I found a very good spot to showcase that you really have to try hard to find their loops in order to, see how repetitive it might be. With the bats, you may have noticed a couple seconds earlier that this was super repetitive. In here, they have so much more variants of the path and loops that it really isn't as obvious. And taking all this into consideration, I'm super convinced that we will have a spring pack with like smaller birds or something in these exhibits. If not, I'm not sure what Frontier is doing, because that would, first of all, it would sell brilliantly. Like from a financial standpoint, that would be a very clever thing. Then second of all, they don't need to change a big technical thing anymore, because they have these exhibits. And just imagine hummingbirds would really work nice. We could even have some parrots in. They would fit into this size of habitats, and some, or maybe smaller singing birds. That would all be really easy to, not easy, okay, please don't get me wrong, but that would be all doable in this variant of exhibits. And I would actually get a DLC with like 10 birds variants. And even better, they implemented now a system in which the same type of animals, because like obviously these butterflies are not all the same species. They are butterflies, yes, but not the same species, but they can all go into one habitat themselves or one exhibit. You see also in my language that I'm mixing up habitat and exhibit here and there, which I think it's fair, because of the walkthrough exhibit, the lines blur a little bit. I would never consider the small exhibits habitats, because these things are like better animated boxes for me. But the walkthrough exhibit really is a lot closer to the full habitat than it is to the small exhibit. And it's something I wish to see in the future. Even though we may never see a big bird, like big flying aviary update with like dedicated barrier types for it, maybe in a Planet Zoo 2 in the future, who knows, but I'm more than not sure that this is not going to happen in Planet Zoo, the original game. So I think we have to look at what we have, and this is basically the small exhibits. And I can definitely see also Frontier adding another type of walkthrough exhibit that is even larger, or maybe they make this expandable, but honestly chances are 80-20. I think 80%, if they add something new, it will be a bigger variant of it, so they would have even more freedom of adding different types of birds, and then if they do the same thing, like having these type of things in here, I could even imagine with the keeper talks that do work in an exhibit. They do have a keeper talk available for butterflies, as far as I know. You could even imagine that they have like not bird shows, but then that you have like a keeper going into the bird cage and giving a talk that then, for example, a bird is flying up its arm, for example. And I think these type of things are really exactly what we need and would love in the game. And the more I think about it, the more I think I would be freaking happy with this in the game. Now that said, I think it's time to wrap it up, because I did promise to you guys that we will speak about the potential console version as well. So let's wrap it up and speak about that. Alright, so we talked about the potential addition of aquatic animals. We talked about the potential addition of birds in a certain way, of flying birds in big habitats, for example, or the exhibits, who knows. And I did spoil at the beginning that I have a certain thought about console. Now, it's funny though, because I think the console plays a lot bigger role in all of that than you would potentially think. Now, the console edition of Planet Coaster came after the support has already ended and Planet Zoo was already a thing. So they had a dedicated team, obviously, that was realizing the wonderful console version of Planet Coaster. I've played the console version quite a lot, and I can say the fear or the thoughts that be in someone's minds that such a game cannot be realized on console is not really justified. If I wouldn't have the game on computer, I would obviously play it on console because it is absolutely amazing. The only thing that is a little bit on the offside is obviously the restriction in terms of how many pieces and coasters and stuff you can use, but that might be addressed with the new gen of consoles anyways. Now, I think Planet Zoo will eventually make its way to console because the success of Planet Coaster on console. But the one thing that you always have to keep in mind is if you realize this for the console, most likely the game has to be somewhat fleshed out. As you have seen, the strategy with Planet Coaster was they released the base game with the addition of 3 DLCs that you could buy right away, and then they released a big chunk of each 3 DLCs in the first year, and then it was done. You know, that was that. And I think potentially something else could happen with Planet Zoo. However, obviously, a console release does one more thing. It makes a tremendous amount of money. So, given you would add something big to a game that requires a big team, it requires money to pay that team, right? And how could you possibly do that? Well, potentially with earning more money through the release of the same game for the console version. I'm not seeing Frontier doing the DLCs at the same time, so I'm not necessarily sure if they would do that once they haven't already done, for example, Birds and Aquatic. So what I could think is that next year, end of next year, they might have the console release. So during the next year, they could actually start adding the 2 mechanics like fully aquatic and more birds in form of either a bigger exhibit or maybe even the full mechanic, but I'm not, you know, I'm quite certain it's not going to be aviaries. It's going to be like a bigger exhibit or the same walkthrough exhibit with different species. So if you have that as a base, you could technically realize the console edition, then release it, and then you have everything at hand. So after that, they could go on with animal packs, for example, and small cosmetic updates that you could potentially release for both platforms relatively easy, you know, without game-breaking things, because as long as the same engine and core stuff is the same and you just keep adding scenery pieces and the same animals, just different variants, first of all, that's going to make a lot of money, which is good for all of us because that means development continues. And on the same side, it will definitely give you a good chance to enjoy new species every 3 months, for example, so keep the people alive. I mean, necessarily, that's what The Sims, City Skylines, and all the other games do for years already, so it wouldn't be something totally off and something weird and something that communities wouldn't love. In fact, that's kind of the modern world, isn't it? So that's my stance on all of that. I think I'm not, maybe I'm still very far away from the truth, obviously, but I think all of these things are more justified than just purely speculative. However, we will see what the future will hold for us. Now, if you watch the video, obviously you seem to have time on either Christmas Eve or the Christmas days, so I really wish you guys a wonderful, wonderful Christmas, a wonderful time with your family, your beloved ones, or simply with your loved one, whoever you are spending your time with. I hope you guys are going to really enjoy that. I will be back after the Christmas days. I will be back with Sicily Zoo. I will be back with Yosemite Valley. I said it. Yes, it's gonna happen. One more episode. Just one more episode. Okay, I just do with that information whatever you want, but you know. So I really hope you found this video interesting. Before you go and before you have an insane amount of food tonight, or before you have an insane amount of nice Christmas evening drinks, whatever you do, please keep commenting down below with your thoughts about the future. Also, what's more important for you personally? Would you favor fully aquatic or more birds? What is your favorable thing? Please let me know. And one thing, if I would be here to wish something for Christmas, if you guys consider subscribing for the channel already, maybe you could do today, because I really want to reach my target, at least of 77,000 this year. It's looking promising, so if you would decide to follow me, there's a lot more cool stuff coming in the future, also with different games. Really hope you guys enjoyed that one. Now have a wonderful, merry little Christmas. Enjoy your time. Thank you so much for your ongoing support. Stay safe, and goodbye.